On May 28, 1947 divisions of the French army, composed of French, Moroccan, Algerian and Tunisian soldiers, are encircled in the Lille sector by the relentless progression of the German army. Despite a desperate strategic situation and fully aware that no help will come to their aid, these men refuse to give up. An absolutely epic battle then ensues. This is the tale of the Lille pocket heroes. The story starts on May 25, 1940, when the Allies faced a catastrophic situation. The Germans have reached the coast of the English Channel and are moving up from the south, while the Allies are retreating from May 26th, towards the coast, and more specifically, towards Dunkirk, but each with divergent objectives. All of this is obviously being hard-pressed by a faster German army that is also capable of effectively concentrating its forces, regularly preventing French and British divisions from repositioning. The Belgians are nearing the limits of their capacity, as ammunition begins to dwindle. Meanwhile, General Giraud's French 9th Army has effectively ceased to exist. All of this was capped off by the capture of Giraud himself, who had stayed as close as possible to the fighting in order to command an army that was in great difficulty. All that remains of the French is a first group of severely tested army whose General Gaston Bilotte has recently died for France. While he was trying to reach his headquarters following a strategic meeting with Generalissimo Weygand and the King of Belgium, he was urgently replaced by General Blanchard, whose men are holding the Lille salient, extending from the Belgian border to Merville. This salient is held by hard-pressed and weakened French divisions, but whose morale remains good. According to historian Buffetot, based on contemporary testimonies, it is the case despite the situation. These troops forming the salient were also part of the best that the French army lined up at the time. Thus, there are 4 motorized divisions, 3 classic infantry divisions, the Moroccan infantry division, and 3 North African divisions holding the salient. For precision, the Moroccan division is composed of 60% Moroccan volunteers and 40% French soldiers. As for the North African infantry divisions, the Diners, their composition is based on regiments of Moroccan, Algerian and Tunisian riflemen, as well as Zouave regiments, which are in practice essentially made up of metropolitan French, North African Europeans and Algerian Jews. The Empire's regiments consist of well-trained and experienced volunteer soldiers with good morale on May 25th despite heavy losses over the previous 2 weeks. But then what happened for this salient, which was essentially held by the French to be a few days later cut off from the rest of the Allied armies? Well, it must first be understood that each of the Allies had divergent objectives, a situation that historian Max Chiaven describes well. First of all, the French are trying to achieve several objectives. The reality of the situation forces Weygand, who leads the Allied armies, to seek to form the strongest possible front on the Somme in order to protect Paris and its industries. Therefore, anything that allows him to buy time or strengthen this front line is good to take. However, while being aware of the precariousness of the situation in which the French forces, surrounded by the Germans in the north, are also convinced that they must, with the British at least, try to break through to the south in order to decapitate the German advance and thus hope to turn the situation around. But it quickly becomes apparent that the French army simply no longer has the means to carry out this counteroffensive. This then leads him to another hypothesis, which is to maintain a bridgehead in the Dunkirk sector in order to continue the battle there. This effectively pins down a large part of the German army, thus buying time to reinforce the Somme. On the British side, General Gort, with the agreement of his government, is actually already distancing himself from the Allied efforts. He's organizing the re-embarkation of the British Expeditionary Force, without promptly informing French military command. Any decision that the British general makes from May 25th is with the sole objective of saving as many British troops as possible and no longer to continue the battle. Alongside the Belgians and the French, this does not mean that the British suddenly leave the front, which was only the case later in the Dunkirk meeting, but that the entirety of their maneuvers are aimed at allowing the evacuation of the BIF and no longer to hold the front or prepare any counter-offensive. The Belgians are still holding the Allies' left flank, despite a critical situation. The majority of the country is occupied, ammunition is logically running out, and German pressure is starting to crack an increasingly fragile Belgian front. In this confusing context, on May 26th, VOC Gane abandons his counter-offensive, and the Allies decide on a gradual retreat together. However, each has their own goals. The French, led by VOC Gane, plan to encircle the Belgians and British. while the former lack everything and the latter only think about re-embarking their men. In practice, on May 26th, each of the three armies still manages to maintain a coherent front while maneuvering despite significant German pressure. However, the next day is an absolutely decisive and chaotic day, where all the contextual elements that we have seen so far will simply interlock and condemn a whole part of the French army to debacle or heroism. On May 27, the situation rapidly deteriorated for the Allies due to a strong German offensive along the whole front. All this while the civilian population finds itself caught in the middle of particularly violent fights, unfortunately adding a good dose of personal dramas and confusion to the events. This push enables the Germans to break through at various points on the Belgian army's front with no possible solution remaining. The Belgians are defeated in battle. The irreversible setbacks lead the Belgian king to consider himself definitively defeated in the battle, and this is confirmed by the surrender of his army, a surrender that is implemented early on the morning of May 28th. There are many diverse and often strong opinions on this topic, but it's important to understand that all of this was just a matter of time. Given the situation, the news could of course only be bad, but it could not be a surprise either. However, it undoubtedly aggravates an already perilous situation for the French army. The British, on their part, display cold pragmatism, focusing solely on the project of re-embarking their troops. To clarify, the purpose is not to assign blame to any of the involved parties, since this would ultimately explain very little and would not do justice to anyone. However, it is necessary to understand everyone's motivations in order to understand the situation. So what is the relationship between this strategic context, which is chaotic, and the pocket of the island? Well, all of this helps us understand that the French army could hardly react to the push of 3 German panzer divisions suddenly cutting off the road, units covering the Allied movement and therefore gradually withdrawing from the salient of the island. After fierce battles on the night of May 27th to 28th on the Lille, it permitted multiple units to cross. No less than 7 French divisions were indeed diminished by the violence of the battles, and whose numbers in reality are more equivalent to 3 divisions that are isolated, then besieged with a very large number of civilians in the Lille sector. This point must be kept in mind, which may seem strange, but the German advance took everyone by surprise, causing a very large number of civilians to be caught in the trap, and will limit the maneuvering capabilities as much as the fire of the French. While researching this episode, I read several accounts of French units halting fire from their heavy artillery and mortars. The Germans take fewer precautions to protect civilians when they notice a major risk in the targeted area. This will create a local firepower imbalance in the context of the ensuing street fights. It is General Molinier, due to his seniority, who takes command of the French, whose numbers are 30 to 40,000 men, 12 artillery groups and about 50 tanks at the start of the fighting, if we trust both the estimates of historians Bouvetot and Lormier. They confront a formidable force, 800 tanks from the 4th, 5th and 7th Panzer Division, backed by at least 4 infantry divisions. According to historian Bouvetot, the total German strength was around 110,000 men, nearly 3 German soldiers for every 1 French soldier. Not to mention the incredible imbalance of forces on the armored side, where the 50 French tanks will have to be judiciously used and opposed to the German firepower. These units emerge from extremely violent battles, especially in the Kavin sector, where the Moroccan Division and the 2nd North African Infantry Division have displayed particularly fierce resistance, of which, of course, I must speak to you. As early as May 26, the Moroccan division, relying on the duel, repels alone all day long despite their complicated situation. 3 German infantry divisions allowing other divisions to maneuver and carry out the retreat decided by the Allied command. In the evening, the division receives the essential reinforcement from part of the 2nd North African Infantry Division of General Dame, coming to protect the left flank of the Moroccan division. However, this division is somewhat scalded both by the losses suffered, as much as the heavy bombings endured during their movements and placements alongside the Moroccan division. The fierce battles on May 27th compelled the French to retreat slightly, repositioning 1.86 miles to the north. These fierce battles have a grave moral impact, nearly breaking several units of the 2nd Dina. And it's at this moment that General Dame intervenes with his men, which will change the course of the battle. The situation is thus described by one of the officers of his staff. Alone, General Dam remains impassive. He sees the danger, but understands the need to support the failing energies. He seems to force fate, and indeed units that would probably have given up without these encouragements will maintain the line almost intact, inflicting severe losses on the enemy, even taking prisoners. Despite severe losses, the two depleted French divisions persist in the ongoing battles, refusing to surrender. They hold the ground as long as they can, then methodically retreat to the island when they are forced to. With a lot of audacity, on the night of May 27th to 28th, some units from these two divisions crossed the Doul to join the Allied advance towards Dunkirk. However, on May 28th, the three aforementioned German panzer divisions closed the path to Dunkirk. And what remains of these divisions is now besieged in the suburbs of the island, in Aubourdin. The 28th of May is the day when the men who are trapped on the island realize the situation they are in, while many units were caught by the Germans in full motion. Amidst the hustle, bustle and panic of civilians, the conflicting orders naturally lead to a chaotic situation. But the situation is effectively taken over by the generals of each division, whose bulk of forces find themselves cornered, not in the island itself, but in several distinct pockets around the city. So, on May 28th, as the day concluded, this was the situation. Most French forces are in the Aubourdin sector, commanded by General Molinier. While General Genoudet's motorized division braces itself in a hedgehog formation to defend the Beaune, General Juin and his men are located in the south of the island itself, while the remnants of a reduced Moroccan division are further north in the Ambersart sector. However, there are French soldiers on the island. Elements from each of the divisions are sent there and offer fierce resistance. In the city, violent street fights will persist until May 30th, stopping the Germans from flanking the French. The situation is serious, yet the French remain undeterred. General Dam of the 2nd North African Infantry Division proposes a solution once again. He plans a massive night attack from multiple directions, using darkness to hinder German aviation and artillery effectiveness. This plan aims to cross the Doul River at 3 locations, enabling the trapped divisions to break free. Molinier, coordinator of the besieged French forces, immediately approves the idea to join the rest of the 1st Army Group. And so at 19:30, the attack is launched. The French advance quickly and charge across the bridges. However, a German device that exploited the day's chaos to set up awaits them on the other side. Many troops and officers are tragically killed during these crossings. Despite the odds, a handful of infantrymen make it to the other side, while some motorized units take advantage of the speed their vehicle offers to force their way through and then head towards Dunkirk. However, when the sun rises on May 29th, the situation is dire. The bridgeheads have ended up being crushed, and the French losses are heavy. This brave but costly attack clarifies the situation for the French. It is no longer conceivable for them to get out of it, and they know they are definitely trapped. Despite the clear and established adversity, the men and officers refuse to surrender. They decide to continue the fighting in what is a true last stand in the literal sense of the term, as much as a sacrifice in service of their comrades marching towards Dunkirk. The French, despite reduced numbers, held back 7 German divisions, including 3 panzer divisions, on the island, allowing the Allies to continue towards Dunkirk, and their embarkation under German pressure, which is thus significantly reduced. 3 days of heroic combat begin, with the French fighting the Germans until their last cartridge. Before sharing the following confrontations, it's important to note an unknown event that significantly impacts the future. On the afternoon of May 28th, French soldiers pull off an impressive move. Amid the violent street battles in Lille, which occur, as mentioned, in great chaos and among civilians. Elements of the 38th French Infantry Regiment take position at one of the major crossroads southeast of the city, while the area is swarming with Germans using this major axis to coordinate the capture of the city. In this context, the men first kill several German motorcyclists, then eliminate a German vehicle and capture its occupants. And among the occupants of the vehicle is none other than General Kuhn, who is in charge of one of the German infantry divisions, precisely conducting the assault on the island. This German general was the sole capture of the campaign, and his capture allows the French to get their hands on the plans for the reduction of the Lille pocket. These are immediately transmitted to the French command, which uses them to prepare to properly receive the attack. For accuracy, the general's detention only lasts a few hours. Since the French of the 38th Infantry Regiment, caught in the fighting, cannot transfer General Kuhn without risking getting him killed. In the context of these confrontations, the Germans locate him and quickly concentrate a firepower far superior to theirs on their position, causing the fighting to turn into a carnage for the French. When the Germans recover their general, only 2 soldiers and a French officer remain to guard the prisoners. But the result is there. Molinier has the entire German plan in his hands thanks to them, and he will use it. Politically, on May 28th, Lille's prefect declared the city open. Under German pressure, the city's mayor attempts to convince the French to surrender. Despite the instruction, the military actively chose to continue fighting, thus not accepting defeat. The Germans launched their major offensive on May 28th. As indicated on the plan that the French were aware of, Molinier was thus able to do what was necessary where he could, that is to say in the Haute-Bourdain sector, since the other French positions are now isolated. The French in the streets of Lille are becoming increasingly isolated, but they are still fighting with ferocity, causing the ammunition to quickly run out. The Germans already control the city center of Lille, which they used to strike the French resistance pockets. However, around 19 o'clock, the artillerymen fired their last shells, the infantrymen against their cartridges. While several French positions were physically overwhelmed by the number during the afternoon, in fact, all organized fighting on the island ceases at nightfall. A few pockets persist until the end of the day on May 30th. Then, running out of ammunition, the French are forced to stop fighting that day. The city on the island has fallen to the Germans, but fighting persists in the suburbs. Bourdain's side of the French endures ceaseless German shelling throughout the day. But despite this, some punch operations are carried out, notably by the men of General Damm's 2nd Dina, who even come back with German soldiers they have taken prisoner. The Germans, for their part, send out leaflets in which they guarantee death to the French who do not surrender, but the French do not surrender.
And the next day?
The fighting intensifies when the Germans launch a new offensive and seek to carry out the threats made in their leaflets. On May 30th, the Germans again push hard on the entire front. The noose tightens in the Embassar sector, where General Méliès' 1st Moroccan Division is located. The Germans manage to infiltrate, cutting off the French positions from each other. Many pockets fall during the day, but not all are taken. The Germans then try again to intimidate their opponents by threatening them with total destruction if they do not surrender. The French and Moroccans refuse, and the Germans keep their promises. The 1st Moroccan Division's positions are pounded throughout the night. Meanwhile, in Haute-Bourdain, the French are faring better. The positions change hands multiple times throughout the day. But a large part of them are retaken by effective counter-offensives and raids, meaning that in practice, the front has moved little by the end of the day. The unexpected resistance forces the German army to maintain pressure with their numerous divisions. This allows for once the French army to buy some time in a context where it has consistently been lacking. However, the next day, a major factor will definitively change the course of the battle. On May 31st, ammunition is running out everywhere. At 11 o'clock, the men caught in the Embassard's trap are running low on ammunition. General Méliès, who commands them, makes the decision to stop the fight to avoid the absolute slaughter that a futile attempt to continue would have been, from bayonet fighting to hand-to-hand combat. However, further south, the French still hold and fight all day long, but despite brutal fighting, the lines are breached at several points, while ammunition is running out at all positions. At the end of the day, it's at midnight, technically on June 1st, that General Molinier gives the order to stop the fight. Recognizing that the end of the battle was imposed, once the ammunition was exhausted. However, this reissue is done in an exceptional context. The extraordinary combativeness of the French and the German general's sense of military tradition. Weigel, who represents General von Reichenau on site, who is in charge of the sector, orders a rare event. He requests this re-edition be done with military honors. An event last seen in 1916 during the fall of the Vaude fort in Verdun. These heroes of 1940, both Europeans and North African riflemen, paraded together on the island on June 1st, 1940, after experiencing hellish days against a capable enemy whose firepower and armor were far superior to theirs. But then, what is the assessment of this battle, and what real impact did it have on the confrontations in Dunkirk? While human losses can be estimated, precise numbers are challenging to determine. Out of the 40,000 Frenchmen surrounded on May 28th, very few managed to escape the NAS. Around 35,000, both able-bodied and wounded, are then taken prisoner, giving an idea of the human losses suffered. The consulted German historians do not provide estimates of the losses incurred, though the intensity of the fighting and the severe difficulties in taking the ground suggest they were also serious. The well-documented impact relates to the commitment of 7 to 10 German divisions that were consequently held back in Lille, even as the re-embarkation of British troops and then Franco-British troops was taking place in Dunkirk. When the German divisions are finally released on June 1st in the late afternoon, it's too late for them to intervene in Dunkirk. Most of the evacuation operations have already taken place, therefore they are sent in their entirety to the Somme front. While General Weger is harshly criticized for having wasted precious time by granting honors to the French, the reaction of the German High Command, as well as Churchill's commentary on these battles, clearly suggests that these divisions seem to have missed somewhere, and at least for some of them in Dunkirk. If I say in part, it's simply because it's not practically certain that all of these divisions could have been engaged on the three fronts. What did the Dunkirk pocket represent? Despite this, in a situation where every hour mattered for both the Allies and the Germans, these divisions, including 3 prized German panzer divisions, couldn't advance elsewhere to maintain pressure on the island pocket. The men of General Molinier's group in Lille persisted in fighting despite their desperate situation. While the Allies needed time, whether in Dunkirk or on the Somme, they fought not for themselves but for their comrades, giving them 4 precious days. As much as for the principle of fighting as long as they could, they did this at the cost of many wounded, mutilated and dead for France, whose story you now know. This episode required significant effort from me. Unraveling the subject was challenging at times due to the numerous and occasionally confusing events during the battle, and the situations were very diverse locally. So I hope I've been clear enough and interesting enough for you to give me a thumbs up, and I also hope to see you under the following videos. To achieve this, it's crucial to subscribe to the channel by clicking the bell. With that, do you know how Charles de Gaulle managed during his first battle in this conflict? To answer that, click on the video that will appear.